Before we get going on today's podcast, I want to tell you about the first virtual clinic of the off-season, which takes place December 8th through 12th. It's the Illinois High School Football Coaches Association Clinic, and you can find that information at ihsfca.coachesclinic.com. I'm going to be having some guests who were former head coaches at Illinois. Lou Tepper, Ron Turner, and Ron Zook. Ron is currently a senior analyst at Maryland as well. Those guys are going to be joining me on the podcast, and we'll have some other guests from Illinois, speakers at that clinic. That clinic is headlined by Mike Loxley from Maryland and Pat Fitzgerald of Northwestern. One you definitely want to check out. I think it's an outstanding lineup of college and high school coaches. Again, December 8th through 12th, ihsfca.coachesclinic.com. On today's podcast, I'm joined by Craig Stutzmann, who is now the co-offensive coordinator at Washington State. When we recorded this podcast from our archives, he was at Hawaii, and he joins us to talk about his spread and shred offense. I know it's one you're going to like. Check it out. Welcome to the Coaching Coordinator Podcast. The summer is moving quickly, and before you know it, it'll be time to report for training camp. This brand new series, which we are calling our Training Camp Series, is designed to help you prepare for and take you through training camp. During this series, we will feature a number of FBS and FCS coaches who have all shared different ideas, processes, and thoughts on how to run and develop training camps. We try to get perspective on everything from how much conditioning to put into your players, to how they handle their installs, to how effectively communicate with players during what's really the hardest part of the entire football season. We hope you enjoy this series. Now let's send it over to today's guests. We continue with our training camp series, and joining me today on the podcast is the passing game coordinator and quarterbacks coach at the University of Hawaii, Craig Stutzmann. Coach, it's great to have you here today.
Thanks for having me on, Keith.
Well, Coach, I told you before we got going, this is also a landmark for us, as we now have interviewed a coach from all 50 states in the United States. So Hawaii had been the one eluding us on the podcast, and so it's great to finally have somebody from Hawaii talking ball with us.
Well, I'm excited to join you and talk football and, be the last state, the 50th state, and be the person to represent and be the first for you. So I'm excited to get this going and talk football.
Absolutely. And as I said, we're going to put a focus on things that matter right now during this time of the year, things that relate to camp. Mm-hmm. Before we get going with that, though, I also think you have a very interesting background and just how you've grown through this profession, starting with coaching at the high school level and working your way up through there. You had played at Hawaii. You were a slot receiver there for your Letterman. But from there, you got into the high school level. So talk to us a little bit about, first of all, making that transition and really, I mean, I guess, coaching ball in your state. You guys are different, especially as you get into, coaching at the level you're at right now. I mean, it's not a very quick trip to get anywhere.
No, it's not. And it's funny because when I got done playing football, I never really thought about coaching. It was about maybe going to New York and getting to being a stockbroker. My family, my dad's side of the families, we got some stockbrokers there. And I was thinking about doing that or maybe joining, the Secret Service. That always intrigued me. So I was kind of going through a little bit of a, early life crisis, right? What do you do when football's done? Mm-hmm. And my former coaches, Coach June Jones and Coach Ron Lee, who was my receivers coach here, and he was my high school offensive coordinator, really had talked me into getting to coaching because Tony Tuioti, who's now the Nebraska defensive line coach, he took a high school job here at a small public school called Kalahale High School, and he asked me to be the offensive coordinator and put in the run and shoot. And I said, you know what, I don't think I have time for it. I don't know if that's what I want to do. And he said, well, there's a teaching job attached to it. And so, I said, I'm going into the HPD to try to get into the Secret Service. But I just had talked to Coach Jones and Coach Ron maybe, in passing one day. And I told them about the opportunity to possibly coach. And they said, you know what, you can always go get a gun and a badge, and why don't you try coaching? It's a great opportunity. It's a no pressure situation. You love the game. You understood it, from the ground level up. I played in the run and shoot in high school at St. Louis High School since, 8th or ninth grade. And so they said, why don't you try it? I think you love it, and here at the University of Hawaii, I wasn't the most athletic guy. So I had to really rely on understanding the offense. And I think that has helped me translate to being a coach because, I think many times the guys who are the superb athletes, they kind of react to a lot of things rather than think about, maybe situationally or technique a lot, where that's something that I had to really focus in on. And so, long story short, I went to go help install the run and shoot, said, I'm not going to do it. I'm just going to come for spring ball. And after the first day, I was hooked. I told Tony, I said, hey, Tony, about that teaching job. He said, yep, it's still open. I need love to do it. So that's how I got started. And coaching high school was great. I mean, I think you really get to develop your own voice, rather than maybe just being a GA right off the bat. For me, I felt like it gave me the opportunity to, how do I interact with the players, with the student athletes? My own coaching style. I never really had anybody to mimic or emulate other than Coach Jones and Coach Ron, which were great guys. I mean, very positive. So I think the biggest thing that I like to do is try to stay positive and really set a standards of excellence and go from there. So the high school thing was great. I got a chance to go to coach at St. Louis High School after that, where I'm an alumni. I got to run into a great player by the name of Marcus Mariota, and he really changed the way that I thought about quarterback play. I went there as the junior varsity head coach and ran the offense, and having Marcus there really changed the way about having, an athlete back there who was able to extend plays, throw from different platforms. We also did some early stages of RPOs and understanding zone read. And so really that kind of spawned the idea of doing some RPOs, some zone read stuff, integrating to the run and shoot, which is some of the things that we do now here at the University of Hawaii.
And then from there, you did go on to get a graduate assistant job. First, you were at Hawaii, which is, I believe, where you met Nick Rolovich, currently your head coach. Talk to us a little bit about, after being at the high school level and then stepping into that graduate assistant position. Because a lot of times when you look at those positions, a guy comes straight out of playing and right into coaching.
Right.
And there's a huge difference between the two. I think you got to learn it differently than the typical progression of playing ball at a big school, getting a GA there, and moving on from it that way.
Right. And there's many different obstacles. Everybody has their own path, but that path was a difficult one too, because you go from being a head coach and running your own offense and doing your own plays, and there's opportunity to be a varsity head coach that same off season when the GA job opened up here at the University of Hawaii. But being able to go back into a role where, you're on the bottom of the totem pole. Nobody wants to really hear the ideas. You're there to break down film. You're there to grab coffee, make coffee, and do the grunt work. And so it was a humbling experience, but it teaches you, a different type of grind. Doing whatever it needs to be, having a servant attitude, and really, just humbling yourself and doing what you got to do to make it. And a lot of times, graduate assistants, you got to go back to your playing days, when you're a freshman. Hey, you're on the bottom of the totem pole, you're out there, you're trying to grind, you're trying to show other people that you got a great work ethic. And, after you show them that great work ethic, then all of a sudden, your talents of maybe your thoughts and ideas, somebody may ask you something like that. So the other thing too, like you said, I got a chance to work with Nick Rolovich, who we played together at the University of Hawaii. So we got a chance to work together, and also our offense coordinator here, Brian Smith, who was the offensive line coach that year when I was a GA. And so, I think all our wives at that time, whether they had known each other in the past a little bit, I think that also kind of solidified, the wise side of things about, hey, this is a tight-knit group, and eventually it'd be great to all work together one day. And so, fast forward to where we are now, we're all working together. We do a great job. I think a lot of our egos are set aside. There's no egos in the room. We talk about things, we work through things, and our wives are great friends, and it creates a great culture that Rollo really has done here with our players. And I think when it comes top down, it's easier to create a great culture here at the University of Hawaii. But I think that was the real, it got me out of my comfort zone to be a GA here at the University of Hawaii. And then after that, I got my first full-time job in a run and shoot at Portland State, where Jerry Glanville was the head coach. Obviously, Coach Jones was very instrumental in getting me that job there. And I coached receivers for the season. Unfortunately, we got let go at the end of that season. And I took a graduate assistant job again, this time at the University of Hawaii, where I got in touch with Aaron Price, Mike Price's oldest son. And the connection there, my best friend from high school is Jason Gesser, who played at Washington State for Mike Price and Aaron Price. And Eric Price was who the offense coordinator at Memphis was. And that really opened up my mind to more than just the run and shoot, different personnel groupings, one back offense, play action, power, one back power, just a lot of different keepers, play action, nakeds, all that type of stuff. So and then also getting to know coaches from different parts of the country. Here in Hawaii, you're so isolated. You don't get a chance to really connect well with a lot of coaches in the mainland. So that was my time to really get out there and get to meet different guys and how to interact with people from different parts of the country. And it was a wonderful experience. It was tough being so far away from home, but like you said, I was born and raised here in Hawaii, played at the University of Hawaii. So being able to be thousands of miles away and grow, as a football coach, and also mature as a young man at the time, and then as a husband and father was great. So and along the way, getting here to the University of Hawaii, like you said, I coached at D3 Rhodes College in Memphis, Tennessee. Emory Henry, I was the offensive coordinator and quarterbacks coach there prior to coming here, and also in the Big Sky, Weber State and Portland State. So, coaching high school to D3 to 1AA FCS to now Division I FBS, it's been a wonderful, journey for myself and my family, professionally, spiritually. So it's been a great journey so far. Hopefully, it just keeps on going.
What was interesting in you telling your story, from the football side of things, is how you learned different things. At Memphis, coaching Marcus Mariota, getting into RPOs, just those different things. How it all comes together to form and evolve into the system which you run today. And I know it's still very heavy in the run and shoot influences, but you've also been able to mesh that with other philosophies, other ways of attacking a defense. I know at Emory and Henry you called it the spread and shred, but the idea was you didn't want to get pigeonholed into we're only a passing team or we only do this. That it was the kind of the evolution, how all those things came together from your different spots, probably to exactly where you are today.
Correct, and it's funny because not only did it really open our my mind to say different types of systems or plays, but like you said, how to attack a specific person or coverage or blitz in a way that we never saw before, and just exclusively 10 personnel, and then so now being able to see how different people do things, and then also you see coverages and variations of coverages in different parts of the country, and it's now with the internet, and now with I think the network has gotten a little bit tighter and people are a little bit more open to sharing ideas. Now you see a lot of these coverages or defense or some things that I may have seen in the conference USA. Now it's getting out west or it's just all over the place. So being able to think of how to defeat certain things. The other thing too now, what it has allowed is for say when I talk to another coach who coaches in the NFL or coaches at another school that doesn't run the run and shoot, that's just different because I don't think there's too many people in the country that run the run and shoot anymore. When they talk about their offense, I'm able to understand it and really pick out maybe a concept or the detail of a play and kind of tweak it. And we're able to now run that in the run and shoot. And how does it match what we do to take advantage of maybe a certain type of defense we're going to face this coming season? So I guess being able to go different places, you really get to decode a lot of different type of football and how you can pull from those resources and now integrate into what we do here.
I don't want to get a ton into scheme at this time of the year, but I think what would be interesting and again, with that run and shoot background and how, the run and shoot in its purest form is a lot of adjustment on the run for the receivers, understanding what the defense is doing and then being able to find the soft spots in the defense. So I know this past offseason, we talked to quite a few people on this podcast. We wrote quite a few articles on our website about match coverage and the different types of match coverage, whether it's man match or zone match. In seeing those different techniques employed in the various coverages that come out of it, how has I guess the technique or the thought process or the decision making evolved for the way you're going to attack the game with the pass?
Right. I mean, you really got to take your hats off to defensive coaches. I mean, the way that they've evolved and got to do certain things, and it's tough. I mean, it's not as easy as it used to be, I think, and you just vanilla cover 3, cover 2 quarters, and so on and so forth. So now with a lot of these match coverages, it does, I guess, make us have to think a little differently. However, the beauty of the run and shoot is, our guys, whether it's the quarterback or it's the receivers, they're only supposed to read their part of the coverage. And I say this all the time, especially if you're going versus zone defenses. Defensive players are tied to strings, whether it's gap integrity or it's also on the back end with coverages. They got to defend certain parts of the field. So if your eyes are right and say a defender's taking away this part of the concept, theoretically the other part of that concept should be open. And I think just being, just trusting, we talk about the word trust religiously here. It's a big thing. You have to trust your coaches. You have to trust your technique. You have to trust your eyes. I think that the windows are getting a little tighter. I think there's the athletes are getting a lot faster on the back end, and coaches are getting their eyes right as well, and being able to attach to players and the receivers rather than just defend zones has made it a lot more difficult. But that's where, again, us as run and shoot guys and as football coaches on the offensive side of the field, we can't be stubborn. We have to be also evolving with the times. And that's what I'm saying. I get a chance to visit with Matt LaFleur with the Green Bay Packers. He's a good friend of mine. They do a lot of things that take advantage of match defense. So go up there, study it, see how we can draw from that, and how are some of our plays that we have or some of the plays that they have, and how can we kind of integrate it and put it more in a run and shoot thought process for our players to execute. And so, it really, the defensive guys with running those type of coverages has forced us to get out of just our comfort zone and really push the envelope more, which as a coach is exciting. And I think players like that. I think they get bored with just doing the same thing over and over again. So us as coaches coming in every season with a couple of new wrinkles, I think just kind of breathes life into our offense.
Well, Coach, let's get into the install and talk a little bit about how you go about essentially creating this trust. You said it's a big part of what you guys do on offense. And certainly that style of play isn't necessarily what your guys are coming in with an understanding of it. More and more teams certainly run the spread and understand those kinds of things, but maybe not some of the run and shoot concepts. So let's talk about that just from the beginning. As you start to work with your players, and you're in charge of the quarterbacks and the passing game. But let's focus on the quarterbacks. What things do you really address in that first meeting to get things going as you kick off your season?
Really, it's about just setting the standard of what we want from the quarterback room. And we tell them, The first thing we go in there, we have a PowerPoint. We talk through some things, and the first thing is we want to be the best position group in the country, because quarterback play, it's kind of like golf, right? You're playing against the field. It's one person. Although it's a team sport, you really have one player that's out there that represents your position, and a lot of things revolves around that. So how can we get the quarterback room to understand the team aspect and really helping each other out? So we want to be the best quarterback position group in the country. And how do we do that? We talk about being humble, having a humble attitude. You see, I look through Twitter and you see a list of things and it's great. These coaches talk about the things that you can control. And one of which is your attitude, and having a positive attitude. That's something that we talk about all the time, and using magnetic words with your teammates, things that draw them in rather than create you as an outcast, and how do you build that relationship and that trust with your teammates, and how do you talk to them? Because in the run and shoot, and we talked about this and you touched upon it, these receivers are making different type of reads, and it's an option route based system. So they have to talk to their receivers and gather information from them. Hey, what did you see? How did you see that coverage? What kind of leverage did that person have on top of you? And so I think just being able to use magnetic words, being positive, and how to talk to players, that's a big thing in our room, is using those magnetic words. Another thing is being hardworking, the effort that you put in. Be the first guy out there. We pride ourselves on being the first group out there to warm up and get ready to go. And talking to those guys, you don't have to throw footballs at the end of practice to be the last guy out there, but work on your craft. You miss a couple of throws here, or you miss a couple of reads, grab a couple of receivers. Hey, do you mind catching me a couple balls from me? I missed a couple bang posts. Can you give me a few bang posts and let me get it right? So, and in the weight room, our starting quarterback right now, Cole McDonald, is a guy who is the first in the weight room. He's there 6 to 7 times a week, and he puts the grind in. And so, it's not just on the football field. You can display that hardworking attitude, but it's also in the weight room. It's in the classroom. It's inside of the in the study hall area. So those things are very important to us. The other thing we talk about all the time is being efficient as a player, making good decisions, and eventually making good throws. I think, Dan Morrison, who is a quarterback coach here under Gene Jones, who's a great resource for me right now, that's one of his mottos, is just good decisions and good throws. And we live by that. That's put up in our meeting room. Being flexible. This offense requires a quarterback, not just talking about physically, but mentally and emotionally, being able to roll with the punches, being flexible with their mind, understanding that every play is a new play. 3 match or 3 buzz or 3 roll or all this type of stuff. Yes, on the whiteboard, it looks a certain way. But at the same time, we're playing against other 18 to 23-year-old kids out there. Things are going to break down, or things are going to be a little bit tighter than what you might have seen on film. But being able to be flexible, they're a quarters team. All of a sudden, they come out with man-to-man and they run 3 double cloud and 3rd and long. Being flexible, being able to understand that you got to go and adjust with the times. And then really, I think all those things really leads you to being a competitive, but also a dependable person. What's the Chiefs, or I'm sorry, the head coach for the Arizona State Sun Devils, Herm Edwards, right?
Yep.
I think it Herm Edwards?
Yeah, it's Herm.
He talks about in the NFL, what's the number one ability is availability, right? I think that's his saying. In our quarterback room, the number one ability is dependability. Everybody's got to depend on you to make the right choices and exemplify what it is to be a good person. And I think those things are huge for us. We talk about that day one, and the biggest thing too is communication. Being able to communicate not just with your with your teammates, but also with your coaches. I think Matt LaFleur talks about all the time is the biggest thing that you want your quarterback to be is an extension of your coaching staff. And so being able to communicate with the quarterbacks and how they communicate also with their teammates and what they want and what we want ultimately to be the best team that we can be.
Coach, I want to take a step back there to the beginning, and you talked about the magnetic words and the standard you want to set with those guys, because I've seen it before, especially younger players. You think of the high school player trying to be, the intention is to be a positive force out there and help the team, but then it comes off as like really negative and just guys yelling, and sometimes maybe that's reflected in what the coach does a little bit. But for you, especially in the beginning, it's so important. I've talked to several coaches already on this preseason portion of our show about being able to see some of those behaviors, being able to see guys doing it the right way and calling it out, especially for those guys who are new in your program, to set those standards and to help them understand it's a part of who we are. So for you, how are you going about making sure that you're reinforcing those things when they're doing it right, and you're helping them, maybe making some of those corrections early on so that you do get them to communicate with each other in a certain way?
Right. Coach Rolovich does a great job. I think that guy, he is the biggest person that will grab the quarterback or one of those players and say, hey, that's not how we do things around here. And so it comes top down, and you never see him yelling at dudes and going out of control. And I think when you have a head coach that acts that way and you have a coaching staff that acts the way, like you said, I think the kids, the players, they understand, like, hey, this is not the way it is here at the University of Hawaii. However, there are some moments where, competitive juices are flowing. A guy wants to be a starter, maybe a receiver runs the wrong route or offensive lineman, he sets the wrong way, and all of a sudden you've got a free guy coming off the edge, and he kind of just loses his cool a little bit. The biggest thing I like to do is walk over to those guys and put my arm around them and say, hey, what's going on? And let them verbalize what the frustration is. I think a lot of times as coaches, we try to assume what they're frustrated with or what they think. Biggest thing for me is communication. I want to know what's going on. Hey, what happened? Oh, coach, busted a route. You should have ran a post. You hit a corner or whatever it is. Hey, you know what? Everybody makes mistakes. Why don't you go talk to him? Go ask him what he saw, why did he make the mistake, and help him out. And I think that's the thing as quarterbacks. I think if you have an attitude where you're going to encourage and help those guys out, it's different when you just point out what they did wrong. I think maybe it comes from having a coach like that and Coach Jones, where it was never about discouraging, it was about encouraging and also teaching those guys. Every moment that somebody does a mistake, it's a teachable moment. So, and sometimes those guys might use profanity, or they might use a word that you don't really use. Hey, there's a better way to communicate that. Why don't you go and tell them this rather than say that? You know what I mean? So it's kind of funny because I can't really think off the top of my head of a specific example, but the biggest thing I like to do is just go over there, put my arm around them, hey, what's going on? And just tell them, hey, go talk to them. You were in that spot once too. You don't make all the right choices all the time. Remember that. How do your coaches, how did you team? And the other thing too now is if it's off the field, like say something happens and, we move into the next drill, call them in the office and just remind them, hey, you said this, because sometimes those guys don't remember what came out of their mouth, believe it or not. Right. So it's, hey, you said that, right? Oh my gosh, I said that. Yeah. I mean, dude, you can't be saying that kind of stuff. And I know. Why don't you go down there, at training table, go down there, grab them one of those desserts or grab them the extra drink down there, go walk over, sit with them and just, hey, I'm sorry, man, I didn't mean to lose my cool. I think when you come off and show the human side of who you are, I think it really breaks down a lot of the different things that might be going on, because the receiver too might just be like, oh, that guy's a jerk. You know what I mean? But he doesn't understand that this quarterback is trying to be the number one guy. Maybe he's trying to win the starting spot, whatever it is. But and what it does is, from a moment where it could be disastrous, all of a sudden those guys create a better bond and maybe a friendship out of it. So always trying to find, make ways to make lemonade out of lemons, I guess.
Yeah, well, now, thank you for pointing that out. And I know you couldn't think of a specific example, but your explanation was great there. And so important to what we do as coaches, but also in developing those player-to-player bonds that we can really help facilitate that if we're coaching that up too. Swinging things over a little bit more to the technical side, Coach, I know as a quarterback coach, you're always working with different groups, and sometimes you have to create and look for the opportunities during practice, before practice, after practice, to maybe work on the fundamentals a little bit with your quarterbacks, their throwing mechanics, their footwork, those kinds of things. How are you developing your guys fundamentally, especially as camp begins?
Right. It's like you said, it's tough, especially at the Division I level. You're not allowed to work with those guys with football in the off season. So physically you're a little bit limited, and you have to rely on, possibly, or not possibly, a lot of times, right? Your quarterbacks in college, they have that quarterback coach that they have on the side, whether it's their high school coach or somebody that they work with. So creating a good relationship with the guys that they work with in the off season, and those guys are great too. They'll say, "Hey, coach, what does Cole need to work on, or what does Chevin need to work on?" And being able to just let them know, "Hey, they got to work on this, they got to work on that." And those guys are very receptive, and they start working on that stuff with those guys. And you see them coming back to camp, and a lot of times it's cleaned up. I think before we even talk about fundamentals, it's really in the recruiting process. We try to look for things that we feel are non-negotiables that would be hard to really coach up in the season or in this fall camp. So big things for us is finding guys they're accurate, guys that throw with anticipation, guys that are a little bit fluid, but more twitchy than anything, that have some kind of mobility. I always say I want a guy that's more Muhammad Ali than George Foreman in the pocket throwing the football as a quarterback. So those are some things that we look for. And then either talking about developmental I would say in camp, we spend a lot of our time, or our let's say quarterback individual time, just comes during the special team indie periods or special teams periods, because when we have our indie period, we spend that whole time with the receivers throwing routes versus air. So, we got to spend that special teams, grab that time and really work on things. And the things that we work on in camp is, I should say, our drills that specifically translate to their reads and our half roll and footwork. So we probably spend about 75% of the time, working in the pocket. Say we have some kind of specific, say the go route. We're going to work on that, the fundamentals of the go route, and how we're going to move defenders with our eyes, or how we're going to identify man versus zone, or where the ball, how we're going to shuffle set on a breakback, and all those sort of things. So a lot of it has to do with getting their eyes right, making those throws, but also identifying and reading, if you will, and using techniques to beat defenders. So it kind of just plays off of the concepts that we're installing. I would say the other things that we do too is every morning we'll go out there for a warm up. I like to integrate our half roll warm up with, whether we do a quick 3 footwork, a tempo 3 footwork, or we're getting backside, and just working those different type of feel and developing that, and also warming up the rotator cuff as we're kind of doing it. And it really came from watching, I think it's Adam Dudo work with Marcus Mariota here a couple of summers ago, about the warm up being something that they do in football. It's not just like arm circles for 10 seconds and then it's, I don't know what else do we do, karaoke or whatever it is. It's actually using, drill work where we're actually taking drops, and then as we're cooling off, we may take drops for, say, 25 seconds, and all of a sudden we're walking back across the field, and then we're doing some kind of rotator cuff warm up, and then boom, we're going to go work the other side of our drops, and then we're going to walk back and we're going to do rotator cuff warm ups. And so developing some kind of routine in the morning has been great for us, because we do practice at 7 a.m. and getting those guys, the whole body, warmed up and their minds ready to go. That's been good. We also do a lot of things with our RPOs, so identifying, we use a lot of cans, so like trash cans, flip them upside down for one of the periods. Myself and one of the GAs will play defensive, whether it's linebackers or force defenders, and we're going to line up there and just making sure that the quarterbacks are identifying the right guys who we're reading. If there's certain pressures that's going to make us kind of change what we're going to do with our RPOs or our protections, making those necessary changes and doing it in a game-like real-type setting. So it's not, seeing the front, identifying your guy on the back end, taking your sweet time, and you're getting 30 seconds to do this. No, we're trying to do this all within about 8 to 10 seconds, and making it a game-like time and situation and giving those looks. So a lot of the, I would say, preseason camp drills is just making sure those guys understand the concepts, the schematics, making sure their eyes are right and getting their feet right to get going. Once preseason camp kind of shuts down and then we get into the season, we're always going to we have a routine. So it's morning, we're going to do the warm up, and then we have 2 special teams period. The first special teams period has to do with, whether it's pocket mobility or RPO throws or scrambles, sprints, and keepers, all these different types of drills. We're going to pick one per day, and it kind of progresses through the week. We pick one per day. And then the second indie period is more of a mental thing. So it's either we're doing versus the cans, kind of getting our eyes right with our protections and our RPOs. It could be corrections off of some things that maybe happened early on in the practices that we weren't just comfortable with or they had questions with, and just kind of review. We'll also do some scramble drills in that period too, sometimes. So, it's kind of what we do, I guess, if that's what you're asking.
Yep.
Kind of the game plan for preseason versus during the season. And then in the preseason too, a lot of the drills are really install driven. So if, say, we're going to work on a lot of 4 verts and we're going to tag, the 9 routes on the outside, and we specifically land those 9 routes in press man at a certain yardage and then off man at a certain yardage, we'll put the trash cans out there and we'll do cans. They are throwing buckets, to the land, the drop zone. So if we're going to work a lot of back shoulder throws that day, where it's kind of a little bit shorter, that 7-step back shoulder throw for the receiver, and it's that quick 3 throw to the back shoulder that happens at about 17 to 19 yards, then we'll go ahead and set up a drill for those back shoulder throws. If we're doing a lot of keepers and sprint ups that day, and that's the install for the day, then we're going to do a lot of keepers and sprint ups. So a lot of the things that we do drill wise in fall camp really gets driven, and it mimics what the install looks like.
Coach, you mentioned a lot of some of those vision drills and being able to make the right decisions in what you just talked about there. Early on, we talked about just the variations we start to see in coverages and techniques, et cetera. How do you teach your guys, what's the classroom portion of that look like in teaching these guys the decision-making process within your offense?
Okay, perfect. So it's happening right now, right? We got 2 freshman quarterbacks that are in, so we get to go back to ground zero and have the other quarterback come in and kind of just get refreshed. But it really is, it's a neat thing that Rollo did, our head coach kind of started off, and it's been great. So first, what we're going to do, we're going to teach coverages. A lot of times I think we assume that every quarterback knows what these coverages are. Well, in fact, they don't. You know what I mean? They might just know what a cover 2 is and what a base quarters is and what man-to-man. They don't understand the variations that they can see. So we'll go through all the different coverages. We talk about definitions of what we call them and why. I think explaining why is huge, especially this day and age, for those guys to know why we call it that and what that is. I mean, we just saw a clip, I think Brett Favre talked about at some kind of forum the other day, that he had to ask Ty Detmer, like, what does that nickel mean? You know what I mean? So, and that's Brett Favre. He was a Hall of Famer, and that happened. So I think as a college coach, we got to not assume that these guys know more than they do. So we go through all the little things. We also go through fronts. We'll go through different blitzes and the definitions and also our terminology. What does a 2-on-1 defender mean? And we explain it to them. So when we get into the season, we get into camp, it's not just saying words and all of a sudden these guys are like, wait, what is he talking about? We want to limit that. So we'll talk through all the definitions. We get through that. Then we'll introduce, the base concepts of what we do. And we have those guys draw up versus each coverage that we see. Okay. And so they start understanding why do the receivers run this certain route versus cover 3? And why do we read that specific defender? Because we put that person in a bind. Then what we do is on a scale from 1 to 3, we'll rate it. Okay. Meaning 1, I don't really like it. 2, it's okay. 3, I love it. It's foolproof. Okay. 0 is like, coach, please don't ever call that play again. You know what I mean? So what happens is these guys now understand it's driven by their own minds of why this certain play is not good versus this coverage. They've drawn it up, they've looked at it, and they've got to say, you know what, coach, I don't like this play because we're running a curl flat combination. They're running cover 2. They got a guy in the flat. They got a guy in the hook. Where am I going to throw the football? Perfect. Then that means you should get away from it backside. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. So then they start understanding themselves of why certain combinations work and why they don't work. And what they can start doing is eventually down the road, we're in a game. They can say, coach, they're really showing us this, but they're giving us this. Can we get to this, this, and this? Now you cook it with fire, or cook it with some, some real fire right there when the quarterback's saying coach and the receivers are coming back and saying the same thing. So I think that's an interesting thing that we started doing that makes these guys understand what they love, what they don't like. And now, because we all know, you don't have 3 seconds in the pocket. You're lucky you got about 2.5. So now they can say, I can move off this concept and get backside sooner because I know versus this coverage, this concept in a 2x2 set, it's not going to be good. I'm off of it. Or, this concept versus this coverage that's coming up, I love it. So I know I can play with this guy versus his zone. Or I love this matchup in man-to-man. I'm really going to be able to hold my eyes with that safety and really give this guy a chance for a great run after catch when he, because I love this matchup. So I think those are things that we do early on with our guys that kind of gives them understanding of when we get into the season. Okay, we're playing Fresno State, they're running this coverage. Oh shoot, we're not going to run this play. You know what I mean? Right. And what it does is I think it also limits, players coming off the field and just being like, why are we running this play? This play's awesome. Yeah, well, it was awesome versus the last team because they played this coverage. We're not going to run it versus these guys. You know what I mean? So it gets them out of a negative mentality to a positive one of, hey, coach, let's get this play going. Let's roll. So they start calling for plays, which is awesome.
Yeah, I love it. Understanding is such a key to offense. And like you said, when you could get everybody on the same page with that, I think it's huge. So a very good process there. Coach, the other process really I want to touch on is the evaluation process. And quarterbacks can be evaluated and probably are evaluated so many different ways, probably more than any other position. Mm-hmm. But for you, what are you going to focus on to help determine, playing time, to help determine who the starter is if you're faced with that situation? What are you looking at both informally and formally in the evaluation process?
Right. We're going into year 4 and 2 out of the 4 years, we had question marks of who the starter was going to be going into camp. So it's perfect. You want to ask our process. Really, we grade and chart every play in a competitive setting leading up to the first game. So it goes from practice 1 in fall camp all the way through, probably Thursday of game week. And what we're charting is and we're grading, it's team, it's 7-on-7s, it's half line, and we even chart their throws in a one-on-one drill. So the way that we grade things has to do with decision making in the throw, and we get the pass results, and we chart it every day. Those guys get to see what they graded out at after every practice. Since we practice in the mornings, we'll meet in the afternoon. So by the afternoons, it's up on the board. They get to see individual. They get to see as a whole unit where we are. And like I said, the standards are in the meeting rooms of where we got to be. Okay, so they get to measure themselves, not just against the other quarterbacks. They get to measure themselves against what the standard is. And I think when they understand, just like golf, when they understand that the standard is this, it's not against, say, John, or it's not against Gary. The standard has to be this, okay? Because if John is throwing 62% and I'm throwing 63, well, shoot, I'm better than him. Yeah, but that's not good enough to win football games, which we're trying to get it to 68%. You know what I mean? So I think it's good for those guys to see visually where they stand stacked up against each other, but also where we need them to be for the standard for us to win football games, which is ultimately the goal. And we break it down, day by day, but then it's also a weekly total. It'll be a full camp total. And so those guys know where they're at. And if at any times, they want to know, well, I don't know if that's correct, then we'll sit in with some extra media time. And our GAs do a great job of plugging in, every rep, and we have a little cut up for each guy, and it builds throughout the camp and throughout practices. So we can go through all the situations. And that's what I like to do too. I mean, the way we do things here for meetings, the quarterbacks and receivers, we meet all the time together. So it's one voice, whether it's Coach Rollo in the room going through the film, whether it's myself, whether it's our receivers coach, Andre Allen. They can hear, quarterbacks can hear what the receivers are being told, receivers can hear what the quarterbacks are being told, and then those two guys can have discussions, because sometimes some things get on the field and it shows up on the film, and all of a sudden they forgot to talk to one another, and they say, hey, John, what did you see there? And they can talk through it. So I think that's been good for us, and that's how we kind of we grade those guys. They know where they stand, but then at the same time too, though, I'll have individual meetings where we can just watch their reps and go through a little bit more of the details of what they need to get cleaned up. But when it's all said and done too, though, I think what gets overlooked that the numbers don't show a lot of times is how does the team react when certain quarterbacks are in the huddle, when they're on the field. What is their body language saying? What words are they using? Does the offensive lineman, do their face light up, or do they droop down when that guy's in there? You know what I mean? And right. I think that's something that I got to keep an eye out for, and Coach Rolovich has a great feel for, is how does the team rally around certain guys. And then the other thing that I look for is just when the ball ends up in the end zone consistently, who's the guy back there? Because that's all that matters, is getting that football in the end zone. It doesn't matter if we throw it in there. It doesn't matter if we hand it off, because it's all decision-making, especially with the RPOs, right? So who puts the football in the end zone? And this guy might throw 68%. The other guy might throw 72%. But the 68% passing completion guy, he puts the ball in the end zone 2 out of 3 times each day. Guess what? That's pretty good, So we got to go with that guy. So the numbers tell one story, but at the same time too, we got to look at it holistically. Yes. And what the offense is supposed to do, score points. So if that guy's in and they're scoring points, guess what? That's the guy. He's doing something right.
Coach, you guys are doing a lot of great things. The results show you guys were number 9 nationally in 2018 in passing. And you described a lot of great ideas, a lot of great coaching thoughts here. But if I were to say, Coach, what's the one thing you do that really gives your guys the winning edge? What would that be?
The keys to the car to make plays and flexibility. I think we do a good job as an offense to give them guidelines, not just rules, and also understand that sometimes just ball players make plays, and you got to be happy with that.
Listeners, follow Coach on Twitter at Coach Stutzmann. That's STUTZMANN. We'll put that in our show notes as well. Coach, I really appreciate you spending some time with us on the podcast. It was well worth the wait to finally get a Hawaii interview, but you did a great job here today, and best of luck to you and the Rainbow Warriors in 2019.
Hey, thank you very much for having me on. I had a blast. Thank you.
Thank you again for listening to the Coaching Coordinator Podcast. Please, if you are enjoying the podcast, head over to iTunes or Spotify and click 5-star for rate. If you have a minute, write a review. It really helps the podcast. Check out our new home for the Coach and Coordinator podcast. That's at coachandcoordinator.com. And follow me on Twitter at Coach K. Grabowski.